Hello and welcome to the Tillage Edge with me, Michael Hennessy. In this episode, I'm discussing disease control with Deirdre Doyle, who's working as a technologist in Oak Park. I first asked Deirdre how spring barley is looking at the moment, considering the dry weather of late.
In general, crops are actually looking pretty well. Crops are, generally were sown into quite good conditions, so this has helped establishment. Crops are looking quite well. There has been a shortage of rain, I suppose, for the last few weeks, so this has led to a little bit of drought stress in some crops. But we did get some rain last week, so this has helped now a little bit to ease that problem. I suppose crops, like I was saying, they look quite well, depending on when they were sown. They're kind of early tillering, heading towards mid-tillering there now at the moment. And just to say that there's very, very little disease really in crops at the moment, which is mainly due to the dry weather we've been having.
Okay, so it's a great setup in terms of having crops that are well established and there's no great disease on it. But when we're thinking about all the various different range of varieties that are out there, in terms of their ratings for disease control, is there much of a difference between them? And will that make much of a difference of what an approach a farmer might take for different varieties?
So at the moment there are a range of different varieties. They're on the department list. There's 6 different varieties on the list at the moment, and they do range in their ratings for disease. For instance, you could take Planet. It's got a score of 8 for mildew there, so that would be considered relatively resistant to mildew. But however, for Rincosporium, rust, and net blotch, it has a score of 5. So that considered quite susceptible there. So when it does come to your disease control strategy, you'll be taking that into account. And then, I suppose you could just take another variety like Limona. It would have a score of 7 for Rincosporium, so it would be a little bit more resistant to Rincosporium.
I suppose it's good we're starting off in a case where there's very little disease, certainly up the sort of our part of the world in terms of Carlow and maybe further north. Are you hearing any disease maybe further south?
No, not particularly. Disease is very, very low in most places that I've heard of. Again, it's due to the dry weather that we've been having, which is great. But at the same time, for farmers that are growing spring barley, it is very important for them to know the variety that they have grown, to know the strengths and the weaknesses of them. There's a lot of information can be found on the department list anyway, but just to, get out into the fields and really walk the crops just to make sure that they have, they know what's going on in the crop at the moment. So if there are any diseases start to appear, they can take this into consideration when they're picking their fungicides.
That certainly seems to be a common theme running through all of my guests over the last number of weeks, Deirdre. Everyone is very much saying, farmers, get out and walk your crops, get into those fields, get down on your knees, have a look and see what's out there. Deirdre, coming to some of the research, certainly over the last number of years, I know you've been highly involved in all this research, and within that, we can see that there's information coming out that there are a number of key timings that you have established in research. You might bring us through some of the trials that kind of led to those and how we've got to the place we're in, and maybe mention some of those critical timings.
Yeah. So there was a number of different trials carried out over the last few years, and at different sites as well, just to get a good broad range of results. From these trials, the results have told us that for your T1 timing, the best time to go is at mid-tillering, and then for your T2 timing, so your second spray, it's when your awns are just starting to peep, so kind of about an inch or so above the flag leaf. The idea behind these timings, so for your T1 mid-tillering, this is to protect your tillers. This is very important as your tillers they're very important to forming your yield. This is down to grain number, really, which is determined very early by the barley plant. So by protecting as many tillers as you can, you're protecting your potential yield. And then for your T2 spray, the best time for that is when your awns are starting to peep. So the idea behind this is to protect your upper canopy, so your top 2 leaves and your awns, which are very important for the control of ramularia as well, which is becoming a problem in spring barley.
Okay, we might come back to the ramularia maybe in a couple of minutes. Just going back to the first fungicide, which is the one that guys are going to be more in their sites maybe over the next couple of weeks. I suppose in the past, a lot of guys might have left that first fungicide run on a little bit. It might be maybe towards growth stage 31. But what you're clearly saying there, if I can get you, is you're coming right back to almost before stem extension, kind of the mid to late tillering stage.
Yeah. So just like I was saying, look, from the results we found, you really should be putting your first fungicide on around mid tillering. This is it's important. Just you want to protect your tillers, and that is the best time to do it, because it's your best opportunity to really protect those tillers, which is the most important factor when it comes to your yield later on in the season.
So in terms then of when we talk about maybe the fungicides, then if we kind of switch to those for a second, so in terms of the actives that are there, what are the main ones that are there, and is there a particular mix that guys should be going for, and there's a particular rates guys should be going for?
Yes. So a mixture of actives is very, very important when you're come up with your fungicide program. The most popular actives that people are going to be using are your azoles, and then your SDHIs, your strobs. Most likely the azole that will be used will be prothioconazole. This very, very, very popular azole still works very, very well for controlling disease on spring barley. So you'd be mixing this with either your SDHI or your strob, and then at your T1 timing, and then for your T2 timing, you'll be doing something very, very similar, but also adding in a multi-site for the help of controlling ramularia. Again, just when it comes to picking what you want to use, it's better to use a couple of actives rather than relying on just one thing. So not to use just an azole in your fungicide program. So so make sure to use a number of different actives there.
In terms of rate, then, Deirdre, you're talking about three-quarter rates, half rates. What sort of rate should you use?
So half rates are what we recommend. From a lot of trials that have been carried out over the last few years, 50% rates are sufficient for controlling disease in spring barley.
Okay. So, and is that true for the T1 and the T2, the first and the second fungicide?
Yes. You'll be using half rates at both timings. So
then the next question then comes to, and you mentioned before in terms of ramularia, and you're talking about chlorothalonil or Bravo, as people might know it. And obviously there's a change coming this year whereby it's not available after the 20th of May. Certainly farmers shouldn't be using it after that date. Farmers might be thinking, God, I really need to include this into my fungicide program. Should they be putting it in at the first fungicide timing?
No, we don't think it's going to provide much disease control. Well, it's not going to do much for your plant really by adding it in at T1. It's a better product to be adding in at your T2 timing, so to protect your upper canopy, because it has always been a very good product for helping to control ramularia. But unfortunately, that it is gone from the 20th of May this year, so it's unauthorized for use after that. So realistically, it's not going to be there for your T2 timing this year. So we will be looking at using a different multi-site then. And from work that we have carried out, Falpit is another multi-site, which seems to be giving an element of control of ramularia. So that's what we would be advising to add in into your fungicide program at your T2 timing. Just like you were saying earlier, including it at T1 isn't going to give much benefit. It's more for a T2 spray.
So the message, I suppose, then this year will be we won't be using chlorothalonil or Bravo in spring barley fungicide programs at all, because it's too early for the T1, and we just can't use it when we need to use it, which is at the T2, which will be, I suppose, well into June, I suppose, by the time we're using it.
Yeah, that's it exactly. Yeah, look, it's unfortunately it's not going to be part of the spring barley fungicide program anymore, really.
Okay, and talking about other chemistries, there's a new chemistry out there this year, Revysol, which is in a product called Revistar, and there's one or two other variations of that. But is that something that people should be considering for ramularia control?
Yeah, it's a possibility. So Revysol is a new azole to the market this year from BASF. Like you said, it'll be under the name Revistar or Lentima. If farmers wanted to use it, it would be probably most beneficial your T2 application, because it may give some control of ramularia. That would be when you would be aiming it if you were to apply it.
Okay. So the next one then I just wanted to focus on a little bit, if I can, in terms of the final fungicide, or maybe fungicides in general, whether it's the first or second one, but perhaps it's more the second one. We haven't mentioned brackling at all, and that's certainly a feature of certainly winter barley in a big way, but probably a feature in spring barley as well. Do fungicides have a role in trying to prevent that?
They have a role in preventing brackling, and there have been certain fungicides that have claimed to help with brackling. However, what we will be saying will be, keeping the plant as clean and disease-free as you can is the most important element in controlling brackling, as disease getting into the plant weakens it, and that would be a big factor when it leading to brackling.
Okay, Deirdre, so just finally, just wanted to ask you a final question here, just in terms of the fungicide. So I suppose farmers are going through the crop and they're trying to fit in other elements of agronomy that they might need to do, such as perhaps wild oat control. Do they have, or can they fit in reasonably well with a fungicide application at the T1 timing?
It is possible to fit in some other necessary jobs, like you're saying, for example, weed control or wild oat control with your T1. Ideally, you will be applying this a little bit earlier, more likely with your aphicide control, because by the time T1 comes around, generally your weeds are getting a little bit too advanced for your normal rates of herbicide, so you probably have to increase your rate there, which can, kind of heat up the mixture, in your tank, which can lead to a bit of extra stress on your plant, which you don't always want. So while it is possible to add in herbicide with your T1, it's probably not ideal, really, just because you are adding more active to the tank there, which can heat up your mix. So ideally you'd be trying not to do it, but it can be done.
Okay, I think that's really good sound advice, given the fact that a lot of crops are under more moisture stress. Again, certainly maybe more towards the northern end of the country, but there's a lot of moisture stress out there. So whenever we're going through a crop, we should try and have as least stress as we can on that to keep it growing well. Deirdre, just want to say thank you very much for your time, and it's been very interesting just to go through all those bits and pieces. So thank you.
Thank you.
That's it for the Tillage Edge this week, and my thanks to Deirdre Doyle for joining me on the podcast. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe on Apple Podcast or Spotify so you never miss an episode. And for more farming information, go to Teagasc.ie. I'm Michael Hennessy. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back next week with more tillage news and advice.